Hello, I'm Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager, and welcome to In Conversation With, the podcast series that delves into the world of financial services and brings you face to face with some of the most notable figures in the industry. Listen as we discuss topics that are currently facing the industry and hear from visionary CEOs to disruptive innovators as we bring you a diverse array of voices and perspectives. We'll explore the challenges they faced, the lessons they've learned, and the insights they have to share about the ever-evolving landscape of financial services.
Hi, I'm Lois Vallely, Chief Reporter for Money Marketing, and joining me today is John Griffiths from EBI. Thank you for joining me, John.
Good to be here. Thanks.
So maybe you could start off just telling our listeners a little bit about you, how you got to where you are today, and what you do at EBI, and maybe a little bit about EBI as well for anyone who doesn't know what you guys do.
Sure, yeah. So I'm John Griffiths, Investment Product Manager at EBI, where I'm responsible for investment research and investment communication. My background is in the fund management and investment consulting industries, where I've worked in a range of client-focused and analytical roles. And to introduce EBI, so we're a discretionary fund manager based in the Midlands, focused on delivering evidence-based, sustainable and low-cost portfolios. We recently passed 2 billion assets under management, with most of this invested in our factor-based and ESG integrated Earth portfolio range.
Cool. Sounds great. So ESG is obviously a huge topic, and especially with sustainability being such a big thing in sort of in the public arena now. So it's obviously a big thing for advisors as well. But also very complicated. There's lots of different definitions for different types of sustainable investments. What do you think are the main differentiators between sort of the broad categories of ESG, SRI, ethical impact investing? Because there's so many words. Could you just sort of explain a little bit about that first to start off?
Sure. Yeah. So I agree that the range of sustainable investing definitions can be a bit confusing to navigate. Part of the issue is that we haven't really had set definitions in place, and so the understanding of a definition can vary from person to person. Let me run through how I see some of the main categories. So I'll start with ESG integration. So this is the explicit inclusion of ESG factors into the investment process, while typically still seeking to maximize financial return. Next, we have negative or exclusionary screening. So this is the exclusion of certain investments due to them not meeting specific criteria, which are usually sustainability or values-based. In comparison, we then have positive or best-in-class screening. So this is the inclusion of certain investments due to them meeting specific criteria or because they're considered better positioned than their peers to manage sustainability risks or opportunities. We then have ethical investing. So this is more the traditional sustainable investing approach, which considers values to a greater extent along with return and historically involved negative screening on a values basis. We also have SRI, so socially responsible investing. This can involve both negative and positive screening by investors really seeking to align values and manage financial risk and return. And then finally, we have impact investing. So this targets investments with the aim of making a positive and measurable impact in environmental or social terms. So yeah, that's the kind of run through I'd give. There's a range of other terms as well, but yeah, they're some of the main ones.
Yeah, perfect. No, thank you. That's really helpful. I might actually write a glossary or something to go alongside this podcast, just so people can refer back. But yeah, really helpful. Thank you. Obviously, the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, is sort of doing stuff to try and help in this area as well. They've got their sustainability disclosure requirements, regulations. And as part of that, I think they've got this whole sort of sustainable labelling system. What impact do you think that's going to have on both the advice profession and, I suppose, financial services more widely?
Sure, yeah, and I can provide a bit of background if that's useful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
SDR. Yeah, so yeah. I'm sure, as many of your listeners will be aware, so the FCA published its consultation paper on sustainability disclosure requirements, SDR, and investment labels back in October 2022, and it's expected to publish its final rules and guidance in a policy statement, which has been pushed back to Q4 of this year. So broadly speaking, the FCA is seeking to build a framework around sustainable investing. And this includes clamping down on greenwashing with the regulation covering sustainable investment labels, as you mentioned, and restrictions on the use of sustainability-related terms in marketing. As part of the labeling measures, the FCA have proposed 3 sustainable investment labels in the consultation paper. Broadly speaking, these are so firstly, sustainable focus. This is products investing in assets that meet credible standards of sustainability or which align with a sustainability theme. Secondly, we have sustainable improvers. So this is products investing in assets that may not be sustainable now, but have the potential to deliver measurable improvements in sustainability over time. And thirdly, we have sustainable impact. So this is products investing to achieve a positive, measurable contribution to real-world sustainability outcomes. There's a range of other proposals included in the consultation paper, for example, covering disclosures and reporting, as well as a general anti-greenwashing rule, which will come into force immediately on publication of the policy statement. And this will just reiterate that communications around sustainability-related claims must be clear, fair, and not misleading. Mm-hmm. So that's the background. In response to this, we welcome this regulation, the clampdown on greenwashing, and the greater transparency around sustainable investing that we expect it will lead to. One of the problems that I think many of us in the industry would point to is the myriad of different definitions regarding sustainable investing styles, as we briefly discussed. So, these definitions can be unclear, even for professionals in the industry. So it can obviously be even more confusing for the wider public and end investors. So in light of this, the FCA developing common language around investment labels and the use of terms is a positive step and really will help investors in making decisions around investing sustainably. That being said, there's been some areas where we've seen some pushback from the industry, just to pick one. So, for example, portfolio managers such as DFMs, there's currently a draft requirement for 90% of a portfolio's underlying assets to have received a label in order for the portfolio itself to receive the label. So clarification has been sought in relation to this to confirm if this includes diversifying assets such as cash, as well as clarifying the situation where a portfolio invests in funds with a mixture of labels rather than just one label, and whether a threshold of lower than 90% might be more appropriate. So we're looking forward to the release of the policy statement in Q4, where the regulator has landed on a number of these issues.
Yeah, no, definitely. It sounds like, though, so if these things come into effect as soon as the policy statement is published, but there's still things that are unclear, is that a bit difficult for people in the industry because they're going to have to sort of prepare for something and they're not 100% sure about exactly what it means?
Yeah, so the thing that comes into effect immediately is just the anti-greenwashing rule, which is just a tightening up of language, effectively, just emphasizing existing rules that are in place. So there's an implementation period of between 12 to 18 months, typically for portfolio managers. So we've got a bit of time to prepare. Nonetheless, we're all paying close attention to the regulation, and we've got the draft. So it's going to be really interesting to see what has changed when the policy statement's released in Q4, and then continue the preparation from there. Yeah,
definitely. So it could be anything from early October to end of December, then Q4. So we'll look out for it.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
I did want to talk a bit about, obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market at the moment, economic sort of upheaval and things. Has that had an impact on performance and take-up of ESG portfolios in your sort of experience? Have you noticed anything?
Sure. So we've obviously seen some volatility in markets in recent years, really, particularly as we entered into the rate tightening cycle, along with the war in Ukraine and the subsequent sanctions and the energy supply crunch. So we did see sustainable strategies that held an underweight position to energy were impacted by this as the energy prices rose. However, there would have been a wide range of outcomes depending on the type of sustainable investing strategy used and the screens that were adopted. Here at EBI, we haven't seen any slowdown in the take-up of ESG portfolios. We found that there remains significant interest for sustainable investing, and that most advisors would prefer an investment solution that considers ESG over one that doesn't. So that's our individual experience. When we look at the wider industry, for example, the latest Morningstar Sustainable Fund Flows report, this outlines how the first half of 2023 saw $50 billion of net new flows into sustainable funds globally, bringing total global sustainable fund assets to almost $2.8 trillion. So we are still seeing that growth in sustainable investing, that growth in the interest and continued flows over time.
Oh, that's great. So, yeah. Because I don't know if it's true, but interest in sustainability just more generally seemed to go down a bit during the COVID lockdown, just because everyone was sort of obviously focused on other stuff. And then even more so afterwards when, as you mentioned, the war in Ukraine and all these crazy things that are happening. But it's good to hear that it's not influencing the take-up of ESG portfolios in the longer term. So, yeah. So obviously, I'm always interested by the term greenwashing, because I think even that term itself has different definitions. So I just wondered if quickly you could maybe say what your definition of greenwashing is, or what you understand to be greenwashing.
Yeah, so broadly speaking, greenwashing, you could say it as making it sustainable related claims or claims around green investment. And it doesn't need to necessarily be limited to the investment industry, but overemphasizing claims around the sustainable attributes or the green attributes that are not borne out through reality. So in particular in the investment industry, this has been levied, say, over the past 5 to 7 years, where there was and has been a big adoption of sustainable strategies, and then some repositioning of existing strategies that weren't sustainable and just putting a sustainable badge on them without maybe changing too much of the underlying process. And so this occurred to some extent. I mean, people would disagree on the extent of that, but it definitely is an issue that does need addressing. So that's why I think many in the industry would welcome this regulation, this SDR regulation, just so that there is a clear and equal footing for firms around funds and what can be classed as sustainable using these labels and what can't.
Yeah, and I know in the US, there's been some sort of anti-ESG backlash in certain parts of the US. Do you think this is going to have any sort of impact on UK or European markets?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's definitely been some concern over a backlash against sustainable investing in the US. So broadly speaking, what's occurred is that officials across a number of states, mostly in the South, have launched investigations into investment managers regarding sustainable investment frameworks and ESG-related shareholder votes. So, we've seen that. And alongside that, some legislators have passed laws requiring government pension funds to divest from managers who consider specific ESG concerns. So it's a really interesting story to follow. Of course, while it's not positive in itself, I would make the case that this anti-ESG backlash is actually an indicator of success, and that we've seen rapid moves across the world into sustainable strategies. And the situation in the US seems to be a response from ESG detractors from a position of weakness, I would say, in relation to the growth that we've seen. I also think there's a fair amount of political posturing in relation to these moves, most likely. But in general, while the press has really focused on this anti-ESG backlash in the US, the direction of travel more broadly has been overwhelmingly towards a more sustainable future. And this includes in the US with the Biden administration's $370 billion green subsidy package this year, as well as developments in states such as Wyoming, which earlier this year voted against a number of anti-ESG bills as well. So that being said, note, of course, that the US remains a dominant player on the global stage in terms of influence and power. However, it's not been the leader in ESG investing and sustainable investing, with this mantle really being taken by Europe, which has the most advanced ESG practices and adoption. So even if we did see extreme anti-ESG legislation introduced in the US, say even at the federal level, we wouldn't expect this to impact the industry or flows in the UK and Europe. Instead, it would likely mean that the market leading position of UK and European investment houses in the sustainable field would only increase.
Okay. So more generally then, sort of overall, what do you see as the outlook for sustainable investing going forward?
Yeah, so I think the outlook for sustainable investing remains extremely strong. ESG information is part of a wider package of information available for companies, with ESG risks being a key area to consider alongside financial and other risks for a firm. ESG risks can be and often are material and impactful. So thinking back to when Volkswagen got caught cheating on the emissions tests, it became clearer in hindsight that their poor corporate governance structure most likely played a role. And so an ESG-focused investor may have been able to better understand that risk profile ahead of the events that transpired. So in general, using ESG information when analyzing potential investments seems to me to be putting yourself as an investor at a significant advantage compared to those that aren't choosing to. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Alongside this, I'd point to the overarching environmental and socioeconomic trends at play, including climate change. I think 2023 has been another wake-up call for people around the world that climate change is a process that's occurring at a global level, is speeding up, and will have an impact on all of us to different extents. So when faced with this scientific reality, it's extremely important that the world moves towards a sustainable future as quickly as possible. And sustainable investing is one part of this. The power that each of us wields in terms of where we choose to allocate our assets or where we help our clients allocate their assets is an extremely significant one. And of course, alongside this kind of scientific reality, we're seeing governments, regulators around the world catching up and developing regulatory and policy frameworks to help their countries move to a more sustainable future. And this includes SDR and SFDR in the investment industry. So, these initiatives are here to stay. They're going to become more targeted over time and more impactful over time. So, for us, investing in line with this scientific reality and these emerging regulatory and policy frameworks rather than against them seems like an obvious path forward at this point as the world moves to a more sustainable future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to any of our readers who comment on my articles going, well, our clients aren't interested in ESG, so we don't need to do anything about it. You probably do. Just saying.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
So just finally then, what can financial professionals in general do to increase their understanding of ESG? Because it sounds like they do need to.
Sure, yeah. So there's a range of great resources out there that can really help develop understanding of ESG and sustainable investing. This includes formal qualifications and certificates. So from personal experience, I can recommend the certificate in ESG investing, which is provided by the CFA Institute. It does a great job of covering a wide range of topics across environmental, social, governance. It takes around 100 to 150 hours to complete. You can study for it in different ways, depending on your investment style, on your learning style. And you don't need to be a CFA member to obtain the qualification. So I'd recommend that one. And there's also the CFA UK certificate in climate and investing. So this one really focuses in on the climate side, specifically going into a good amount of detail on climate science, policy responses, and the significant shifts that we're seeing in the investment landscape as a result of this. Study time is similar between the two. And again, anyone can sit for the exam. There's also a good range of books out there. One we recommend here at EBI is called Your Essential Guide to Sustainable Investing. That's authored by Larry Swedroe and Sam Adams. So yeah, this does a really good job of just covering the sustainable investing landscape, as well as unpacking some of the academic research behind it. So that's the main resources I'd recommend.
Great. Might have a read of that. Thank you. Very helpful. Yes, I think that's probably all we've got time for this episode. But thank you so much for joining me, John. I've really enjoyed chatting to you today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation With. We do hope that you enjoyed it. Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date with all our new content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as our print edition Money Marketing magazine. So make sure to subscribe. follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.